If you're into tabletop, and you run, especially if you're a game master and you run games, something inspires you and makes trying to tell stories or trying to create opportunities for your players to live in a world and make pivotal and important choices in that. Something inspires you to want to build, to want to world build. And I'll stay away from saying storyteller because I actually don't. I am one of the people that kind of do not believe that a game master is for and foremost a storyteller. You have to be able to convey visual information and sensory information. You have to be able to portray characters and breathe life. But it is not really your job to tell a story. I think that's where some dungeon masters and game masters go astray, trying to tell their vision of a story instead of letting the characters live in the world and using the cues, using the actions that the characters take to build where your narrative is going to go and what your story is actually going to be about. Now, that's not the conversation that I want to talk about today. What I actually want to speak on, it's related, is my passion for film. So I do have a passion for storytelling. I'm starting to read more these days, but I've always been a very love the visual nature of cinema. And I can't help when I'm playing at the table to try to convey everything in a cinematic nature. And I am always trying to use so much visual information that I'll also say one of my weaknesses, that I sometimes forget those other senses like smell, taste and touch, trying to convey those things. And I'm trying to get better at that. But where I really lock in is what the players see, and often trying to convey how they see it, right? Like, because film is a visual information, and it's weird because I know you cannot get film, tabletop is not film, but I kind of play it as such. I play sessions as though they are kind of mind movies that we're all putting together. I think of it as all the rolling of the dice and the checking of your character sheet and moving hit points is I look at that as the production. It's when you say cut and the gaffer, moves a light. But at the end of the day, when the game session is done, you just have this mind movie that's so, if it's done well and everybody had a good time, everyone can remember those moments. And they can remember the nat 20, but they remember that critical role, not just as the dice roll, but as the visual information that they saw in their brain, right? And so that brings me to wanting to do more videos where I talk about my passion for film and what films are currently or in the past or inspiring my game. And so recently, last night, I decided to just go out. I'd heard good things about Ryan Coogler's Sinners. I really like Ryan Coogler, so I love the Creed series. Black Panther, the first movie, was really good. Kind of a misstep on the second one for me, but I think I knew it was going to be good. I don't think I knew this movie was going to be this good. And this is inspiring in so many different ways for me. The movie hit me on such an emotional level, which sometimes happens when I go see a movie by myself, which is what I did. I like to really take in a film experience. This is the closest thing to like a reverential experience that I've had in a film in a long time. And I can really go through, I tried to outline some of my thoughts here. This is really just a ramble, but it hits on so many levels for me because maybe so many of the things that I find really important in a story, cultural context. I'm a big movie. The sound of a film is half the battle too. I always talk about visual information, but it's the music and how it moves you. How epic or not epic is it? How, what kind of emotion is it giving? And this is one of those movies where it's about music, right? And so I am going to get into some spoilers. So I'll try to stay away from those first and let you know anytime I'm going to go into spoiler information. But what I can say is that I shed tears on this film. And this is an accomplishment, huge accomplishment for Coogler, and amazing cast. Michael B. Jordan, sometimes gets this criticism of being one note. And in this film, man, playing these two brothers, I was convinced, you know. I didn't know how, you know, I know how the gimmick of doing a one actor, two twins, you know, Tom Hardy did it with Legend, and I'm like, okay, that's been done, right? So that's nothing new, but boy, do you lose. You start to, this is one of the few films where I was like, oh, that's not Michael B. Jordan doing his character thing. That, like, I'm like, oh, that's Smoke and Stack. That's how I felt. These characters, that's Smoke and Stack, and I just, like, they were cool. Cool characters to want to be around, or want to, like, kind of like live within their world. So many cool things happening there, and then just an amazing cast overall. The vampires, all of it. But so that my overall first impression of the film is it's amazing. Now, on surface level, it kind of evokes the sense of, like, From Dusk Till Dawn. Like, you could easily say, if somebody said, what's this movie about? You could say, take a Southern folklore gothic tale and then, you know, basically set it in that setting, in that period, and then just add the From Dusk Till Dawn situation. Just add vampires, right? And on the surface level, that is what it is. But what makes it so different is how well written these characters are. You know everyone's motivations, and they spend time with you, kind of like getting into understanding what the characters want from the world, what they're trying to do, who they are, how other people see them. They even get into that, and it's really interesting because you even feel that from the villains. Like, the vampires are usually just, you know, in movies like this, you know, meat shields that run around and hiss and jump, and they do all of that. But the vampires are also people, soulless people, but people nonetheless, and people who creatures who were people, who still have their cultural understanding intact, and kind of still know where they come from. And culture plays a big part in this film, different cultures, and how that relation to music is like just phenomenally executed. So yeah, great stuff. You know, I can get into, you know, unpacking like some ideas around, you know, when it comes to some of the historical period piece, like the Irish, you know, if you know the history of the Irish in this country and black people in this country, there's some tension there. And then, so there's some interesting thing that Ryan, like, works within that standpoint. And I think one of the things I just kept feeling in the film is that these two brothers, they've done it all, right? Like, okay, so I will get into some spoilers here. They've gone to war, right? And then they've gone in and they've worked in Chicago, right? So they were gangsters in Chicago, and I won't go into what they did and all that stuff, but they've kind of returned back home to Mississippi, to their roots, and with enough money now to try to establish something on their own. And this is where Ryan Coogler starts to invoke those things of, like, you know, I often feel the relationship to gangsters in America, they go hand in hand. And like Wonder Bread, like wheat bread and bologna, like, this is a country that was kind of built on, like, you know, taking things and deciding they were yours and then establishing yourself and then going legit. Like, if you look at Las Vegas and you look at NASCAR, you look at the liquor industry, all of it is criminal activity until laws were passed where that criminal activity is no longer criminal, or making enough money as a criminal until you can go straight. That's always been, people don't act like that. I feel like it's one of the real kind of American dreams. It's why, like, we, you know, not to say that we promote it, but it's why we like movies like Scarface, and why we glorify the Chicago, you know, the gangster, you know, era where people were dying left and right. You know, no one ever talked, you know, that was a time where Chicago's always, we talk about Chicago today, but Chicago has always been a place of bloodshed. It's always been a place where criminal activity thrived. And so that relation to that, these two brothers trying to find their place in the world and also trying to, you know, be good people to their community. It also talks about the relationship of gangsters to community, because in black neighborhoods, and a lot of times in any neighborhood in this time in America, you know, the community protects the community, and black communities and Chinese communities and Native American communities were under, you know, were definitely at risk and under threat at all times. And a lot of times it is not law enforcement. There is no sheriff in town to protect you. Who it is those people that you trust, the people that you actually trust, are those people, the gangsters, those who are willing to arm themselves to protect the community. We have a different relationship with gangsters now, but that relationship has always been kind of sunless because, the relationship between the law, especially at that time and even now, is very thin is an understatement, right? So that's interesting. Then you take the dynamic of these two brothers going in to create a juke joint. They want to create a club for themselves, a place where people can have fun and, blow off steam and drink and do all that stuff. And they go and they buy land, which, very similar to, it makes you evoke sense of Tulsa and different things like that. But just the idea that, buying land from, white folks and establishing a place for themselves, not realizing that they're really going to be safe. And what's interesting, I get the feeling, I can't say that Ryan did this on necessarily, but I get the feeling like he literally buys land in a sundown town. And this is a movie about vampires, right? So what happens when the sun goes down? The monsters come out. And black people have had that relationship, a real relationship to be. If you're driving in parts of this country to this day, there are places you do not want to be caught in with this complexion or darker when the sun goes down. And so these brothers, because that machismo, that sense of, I have the money now, I have the guns now, I have the security, that should provide security. But that's never really enough when the world is against you. And so there's this interesting that the world has told them, if they go out and get enough money, which is a system that we see often with, I think people of color, black men, if I get enough money, I'll be able to establish freedom. And so these are men living in a world of inequality with an illusion of freedom. And then here comes the vampires. And what I really loved about the vampires, starting as like Irish vampires, but as they, I'm spoiling here, as they killed, they were killing a multitude, a diverse number of people and bringing them into their ranks. The vampires were the creatures of equality. Like, everyone was level. No one saw skin color. No one saw class. No one saw a socioeconomic level. No one saw gender amongst the vampires. The vampires were truly equal. They had that equality, but where they had equality, they also came with an illusion of freedom. An illusion of freedom because they are under this bondage of having a soul that's trapped, that can't be free, having a soul that can't feel the sun, having a soul. And so that's an interesting context. Like, so that brought depth to the vampires. The vampires were the ones saying, like, hey, look, because the Irish Americans also went through a kind of, they were the original indentured servants who, before we even had slavery. And so this interesting take of like this probably trying to sell, even though he's being deceptive. Hey, I know somewhat what it's like to be the low man on the totem pole, or probably not the best use of words, but like in the low person in a hierarchy, in a pecking order. And you all, let me bring you over to the side because this will make us all equal. So that's a really cool kind of dynamic happening there. And there's a moment in the movie where the characters say, after all said and done, what was even though all this horror happened on this one night, the day leading up to that night was the only day they felt completely free. And I thought that was really powerful because it's in between just this very sliver of time where anyone in this story felt free. And they're dealing with two different types of bondages, two types of worlds, and they really just had to choose which one they were going to try to live in. The movie does an amazing job. The music. First of all, let me see. You're like, Malcolm, this has nothing to do with Tabletop. Well, in my world that I'm running right now, it's my personal world that I've built for my campaign. I call it the Ashlands of Akbalon. It's actually based on the word Alkebulan, which would actually be the original, or what often some people say is, or it's kind of noted as one of the original words for Africa before the word Africa established the continent. And then I wanted to build a world where it was based on West African culture and where our Tolkien characters were more the Tolkien-like characters. When I say Tolkien-ish characters, I say like traditional fantasy characters. So elven characters, dwarves, orcs, they all come from another land, world, continent called Aldaria, and they come from this place that has been destroyed. And so in a world they now are the, the refugees of their world. They don't know if their world still exists, but they now have to live here. And so it's kind of this mashup where sometimes I think when people do like Afrocentric lore, I wanted this to be somewhere my players could still feel familiar in a world where they also feel completely unfamiliar, too. And they were like grasping with what the monsters are, who the people are, what the culture is. And so that's been really fun to explore so far. And one of the things that as I was doing a lot of there's so many cultures in Africa. So first of all, let me not paint a very broad picture of Africa, because like we always act like it's a country, and Africa is a continent full of many different types of people and cultures. So this acting on this world and this part of the land is very much based on Yoruba culture, and within that, so like the Orishas, and one thing I think was very interesting about West Africa is that the bards, what I call a bard in this world is called a griot, I don't know if I'm saying it right, or a griot. And what I thought was awesome is in the very opening moments of Sinners, they start to talk about how powerful music is. And I was going into this, I didn't know how how big of a role music was going to play in this movie, and so that hit me even harder. But they start talking about the music, and they start talking about like how like the Native Americans have certain like ability, certain the like fire keepers who sing songs, and they're talking about the beauty of music, but also how that music often is like the evil in the dark can see the music like a light. And it was a great take on how like the standard like Western like kind of Christian take on this kind of music was that like you gotta also think at the time what this movie's about is the blues, and the blues was like the spawning of like early blues is the beginning of rock and roll. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Early blues is the beginning of hip hop. Early blues is so many different musics of American culture are rooted in the blues. And at the time, the blues was Sinners music. And that's what this movie's about. It's about the Sinners. It's about this beautiful art form that because no one else considered it art, it was relegated to whorehouses and juke joints and houses where people like bars, and now blues is kind of a high level thing. You everyone appreciates the blues, but it's always been, and it's usually not until the it's not until more widespread, I don't know the word's escaping my mind here right now, cultures usually gravitate towards something that's often created in or rooted in blackness, right? Like the blues is rooted in West African tradition and music, and it's just something that they say in the film is something that black people brought with them. And I think it's interesting that it just talks about different cultures and how music is important to them, focusing in on this particular black musical art form. And it shows how like I think what it's often like depicted is that the blues was evil music. The music wasn't evil, but often this movie sets it up as the evil is attracted to it because the evil wants to corrupt and use the power of the music. And so that's a very interesting thing that the vampires see this bard in the darkness playing his music. And that's what the main character is not Michael B. Jordan smoking stack. The main character is this bard, if we want to talk about a bard named Sammy, and this griot. And so I thought that was really cool. If you love scoring in film, Ludwig Göransson, something about the Swedes, Swedish, like they like so many composers, so many good musicians come out of there. But this guy's amazing. In terms of the score, and then he doesn't do like a lot of the blues stuff. So there's like, this movie has both a soundtrack, right? So the soundtrack is incredible, and then the score, like combined, Göransson did the score for Black Panther, and I thought the first Black Panther score was phenomenal, really good. But this is a whole nother level just the music is amazing, and I that's all I can really say about it. Is it's just moving, it's epic. And I always have like, there's this way that Göransson takes the blues and the sound of the South and the sound of like the twangy banjo, and then adds that like sinister or like emotional welling that you would get to where it's like a very epic and moving, everything matches with the tones as a story goes on. So this is just like the vampires, the glow in their eyes. It's kind of reminiscent of that like Blade Runner look. It is something. It is and also remember, like, this also, I'm a film head, and a lot of films today are not shot on film. You know, a lot of things are shot on digital. It's a 65 millimeter film, and you feel it. It's like, oh, yes, this is what movies were meant to look like. And it looks fantastic. And yeah, there's some CGI here and there, but everything's done so well that there are very few even cuts where I was even distracted by a shot, you know. So amazing things there. There's just like, there's probably more to unpack. Like I said, I just felt like I had to get this out. Like, sometimes I watch a movie where I'm like, yeah, this movie will inspire my games, you know, in the future. I know that, like, I'll have to have some of the tone of it, and when, like, some of the folklore horror I can bring, you know, not I never want to copy the direct story, but like there could be really cool, like, it helped me envision, like, you know, a story around a griot that's important to maybe the NPC that's important to my characters and so forth. So yeah, I would recommend seeing this film. Everything in it has a lot of like layers. It's like, you know, it's all kind of like taking the standard tropes of a vampire film, but allowing you to explore the nuance that's in there from the standpoint of these characters and the period that they would be living. So, for example, like, Black love is often not shown in, you know, it's not shown in a certain light in film like other people's like relationships are, right? Especially also in the day and age where we really push diversity, and I think diversity is great. Often that means, from a movie company standpoint, is just going, okay, how do we fill the diversity? Like, how do we make this more diverse? So, okay, we'll have one black guy, we'll have, you know, one brown wife, we'll have a kid that's, you know, non-binary, whatever it may be, and that's fine. And, you know, so you're creating, you're showing that there are, and there absolutely are families composed in those ways. And I think I do champion sharing the family structure in all its forms on film. I think everyone should be represented, but often that also comes with the lack of seeing traditional Black love on camera. And this film shows that through, I think, Smoke and his partner, a woman that he's been kind of always in love with in the past. And it just depicts this movie also just depicts raw connection. It doesn't even necessarily always often depict love. It depicts sexuality, and some people who think that the sexuality might be a little over the top, you have to remember the blues was over the top at the time. This was raw emotion. The blues, and even if you look at country music, it's this. This is all Southern poor folk music, you know, and that usually is just guttural emotion coming out. And so a lot of that music at the time was about sex, or it was about drinking, or it was about what somebody did to you. And so this movie explores that, because, again, the context of it is through this kind of sound and this music. And so I think it explores the Black love in a way that I thought was really awesome to see. And then it also explores not the dangers, especially at the time and even now, of a Black man being perceived with a woman who's not of color. And the movie does an interesting job. I forget her who plays her, the girl was from the Transformer films, or the Transformer film back in the day. But you would say the white young lady in the film who plays, I forget her name, the character's name, they actually tell you that, you know, during this time, she has, like, her grandmother's, you know, her mother's father was half Black, right? And back in those days, and even now, a lot of places, people still subscribe to the one drop rule, right? There was literally a one drop rule, like, where if you had any Black blood in you, you were considered Black. So while she looks completely white, and for all intents and purposes probably carries herself as white, she is still accepted in this Black community. And while she's accepted, she's had a relationship with Stack, but they can't explore that love any further because he fears what that means for him. He can't even, when he's out in public, and this is a man who has killed people. This is a man who's gone to war. This is a man who's a gangster. And even still, he tries not to look her in the eye or or you know, or the way he moves around this woman is to protect himself. And it is something that is very true that a lot of black men understand, and definitely back then would have been in full understanding, you know, if you could get killed. And then that plays into his demise, even though she's family to him, because later while trying to help him, she gets bit, right? And so then when she comes on to him and they get together, that ends up with him being killed. So that it was always that very thing he feared is exactly what kind of is his demise. So the way it plays with those historical undertones and understandings of the world, but then makes them like these superstitious folklore, these monsters. The monsters are both real and very much fantastical. And so it's I probably just could continue to ramble. I sat in the theater and I shed tears at the end of it. And then I will say, don't leave the theater early, because this is one of those films that Marvel ruined the whole after the credits experience. This movie kind of does like several mid-credit sequences, and a lot of people were walking out, and where the movie really hit me was during those sequences, because I won't even go into them, but I'll say that's where the movie landed. That's where the plane landed, and you were like, oh, we're back on the ground, and this is kind of the whole point. That's all I'll say about that. So I won't spoil that. If you haven't seen it, but if you know, just my final thoughts are just that it's a film that I think, as a GM and someone who runs games, it's just inspirational, right? Like I hopefully I'll continue to talk more about, you know, movies that I grew up on, like Legend and things like that, that inspire me. But this film really was just like, whoa, a kick in the pants of like, yeah, film is back. I rarely see good, you know, haven't seen a lot of good films lately, and this one was like, yeah. And you know, also on a, you know, cultural standpoint, it definitely just hit on a whole nother level. And I think Coogler is also always able to do that. And I imagine for someone who is into real, you know, if a lot of D&D, I think GMs or dungeon masters are into history, right? You kind of, a lot of times, usually you are. And so also having this certain sides of historical blackness so underrepresented. You know, we always get a slave movie, or you know, we get the white savior movies, and this is not that. And this is not, and it's also when we do get the like, black people are strong and powerful, it's almost like so overblown that it's so fantastical, like Black Panther, where, you know, in the world of Wakanda, they have this magical rock that does all things magical, all things amazing, but, you know, they're most technological in the world, but they ride around on rhinoceroses and what? Like, you know, and then they don't share that. They don't help their people. And the first thing they do, they share it with the world. They share it with the superpowers that threaten them. It's just silly, you know, like, whereas this, I could buy that this happened, you know, like somewhere historically, right? It's almost like this Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, but with vampires in a little saloon in a little juke joint, right? Instead of a black town. And it also just is, it's also just a depiction of every time, you know, black people working and moving on their own, and how often that would be, those mechanisms would be thwarted by like one evening. One night can change everything. And still we persevere. And often the way we persevere is through the one thing that can't be taken from us, which is our ability to storytell, and usually to do it through music, and to do it through something that comes out of our soul. So go see Sinners. Yeah, I don't know if this is worthwhile. And yeah, go see it. Talk later. I'm going to end this. Where do I go?